Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com, and this week I'm happy to introduce a special guest on the show. We have with us today Carlos Martin, who is the Chief Commercial Operations and Revenue Officer at Rocket Pharma, which is a company developing gene therapy cures for rare diseases through innovative science and platforms. Carlos joined Rocket in April 2021 and established the company's early commercial strategy and infrastructure as the company's chief commercial officer. Prior to joining Rocket, Carlos was the U.S. commercial head of advanced Accelerator applications, a Novartis Oncology Company. Carlos brings in-depth background and experience globally and locally in commercial strategy and operations across a wide range of modalities and disease areas, including oncology, cardiovascular, metabolism, and complex therapeutics. Carlos has a bachelor's degree in economics from ESADE and the Polytechnic University of Barcelona, Spain, as well as an MBA from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. To learn more about the challenges, opportunities, and the scope and landscape of gene therapies currently and where the space may be heading in the future, let's turn to Carlos now. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for the invite, Ayesha, and Xtalks.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you. And so, Carlos, I'd like to ask you, as a seasoned veteran in this space, can you describe your journey in the biotech sector and what ultimately led you to Rocket Pharma now?
Yeah, happy to do so, and thank you for having me in the show. It's a great show to follow and listen to. So I started in biopharma right after business school in Arizona with an internship in Eli Lilly. And then I joined Sharing Plow in New Jersey and New York, where I worked in allergy and virology in both commercial roles. And then I moved to Novartis, where I had multiple roles in general medicine and cardiovascular, also in oncology, and all the roles were in commercial strategy, business development and licensing, and areas of operational management as well when it came to business franchises or general manager roles in Novartis. And one of the things I realized is that I was really driven by building, right? And the entrepreneurial side of the business, which even in a big company, you can have it if you have been you. And I also realized that I was enjoying the combination of science and technology. Right. And that's in a way what drove me to Rocket. Rocket is kind of a unique place. It was the perfect place when I looked at it coming from Novartis, where I had been in multiple modalities like cell therapies, radiopharmaceuticals, small molecules, in rare diseases, in mass markets, and Rocket was hitting them all. In Rocket, we have advanced platforms to treat gene therapies with multiple modalities. We are actually modality agnostic or platform agnostic, and we go for hematology, immunodeficiencies, and cardiology complications, always in rare diseases. So that's in a way what drove me to Rocket, and the ability to build it, right, and bring these therapies for patients worldwide that could actually and potentially cure if we hit the right clinical data.
That's fantastic. And so I would imagine that it would have been quite the transition, or perhaps not, going from big pharmas to a smaller biotech or mid-sized biotechs. And so what has that been like? And what learnings have you taken from big pharma and were able to translate at Rocket? And what are some of the new learnings that you've had in terms of building, as you mentioned, at Rocket Pharma?
Yeah, for sure. So when it came to learnings to bring over, generally when you're in a biotech that is still R&D stage, the way of thinking and the way of operating is very focused and specific on R&D. So you have a lot of depth in few areas, and that's what you need to keep the programs moving through the development process. One of the things you bring right away is the commercial strategy and early product strategy look into the assets. If you leave only R&D, which is extremely important, and you don't add in elements of pricing, elements of health economics, elements of what is going to be the adoption of this therapy in clinical practice. Are the endpoints the right ones or not for adoption and for pricing? Then the asset is not fully developed from a strategic point of view. So that's kind of the first thing you see when you join. How do you develop target product profiles? What are the right patient profiles? How do you build supply chains that are sustainable and things like that? And then the second thing you realize is that normally R&D stage companies, they are not set to commercialize, right? We always talk in my team that we are not launching a product, but we're launching a new company, especially when you have the first approval. So that's an element that coming from a fully built company like Novartis or Schering-Plough or Eli Lilly, you can add in very quickly all the elements that you need to commercialize that go beyond commercial. It could be in finance, it could be in compliance, it could be in human resources or in supply and operations. So those two areas, how do you set up the company and how do you set up the product to be successful in a commercial setting is what you do right away. Then on the other side, one of the big learnings for me at Rocket is that you really go across all functions very quickly, right? So you have a very, very clear view of the whole business from beginning to end, from basic research all the way through filing and approval and going through manufacturing, supply, elements of finance, elements of financing the company. When you're in a big pharma company, you don't think so much how the company is being funded because we have weekly, daily, and monthly revenue. But when you're in a pre-revenue company, how do you fund the company and what's the company valuation becomes extremely important to keep going. So one of the areas that actually I really take away with me is the importance of the shareholder value and how you bring and build that shareholder value in the short term, but also over the long term, because that's what's going to keep the company running, right? In a bigger company, depending on what level you are, that is not such a big area of focus, right? When you're running a business franchise or even general manager in a country, the shareholder is important, but it's a bit more removed from your daily operation, while in a biotech is quite present. And then I would like to add also one thing that not that big pharma is not focused on patients, but they have so many products that at the end they lose that focus sometimes. In a smaller biotech, you have a high level of attention and focus on the patient because you're focused in less disease areas and you gain a lot of depth in each disease area. And also in a rare disease area like I'm working on, working with patient advocacy groups is kind of our
Yeah.
day to day.
Yep, those are great insights. Thank you so much for that. And in terms of the rare disease space in particular, what makes it? What are some of the advantages of working and being at a smaller biotech versus a larger one? And in terms of specifically rare diseases, or are there any advantages or any specific challenges?
In a rare disease?
In the rare disease space specifically.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Well, in a rare disease, you have many challenges, but also a lot of advantages. I mean, the main challenge is that it is small, right? And the best approach always is the platform approach, similar to what we are looking to build in Rocket, because then you have efficiencies and you can have economies of scale and you can have a more sustainable business when you add in assets within the same platform or similar modality, right? Otherwise, a rare disease is challenging to make it sustainable if you have only one asset, no, or one indication. The other area in rare disease is that the endpoints and the clinical trials, they tend to be small. So then there is more risk, right? When you have a smaller sample, you need to make sure that you really treat the patients the right way in a small sample. That means that the discussion and the patient selection is extremely important. Then the counter to that is that being a rare disease, it's not easy to find these patients sometimes. In some rare diseases, they're well diagnosed, but most of the time they're not properly diagnosed, especially if you come in with a gene therapy that tends to be transformative. And it's not only transforming the biology of the disease or the patient life, but also how the disease is being identified and diagnosed. So that's part of the challenge, that the sample size, the diagnosis, and the speed to diagnosis and patient identification is not there in the early days, right? As you progress in your clinical program, then you get better at it, and then that's in a way develop over time within the company. Then on the other side, some of the advantages in rare disease is that you have a lot of focus in the disease area. You work very closely with the patients, with the families, with the investigators. There are not many investigators that really know about them. So the few of them that do it, they're very passionate about the condition, but also they are very passionate about supporting new therapies, right? So you feel like you're in a way part of a family, that it goes beyond the company walls to really solve the issue, right? So the closeness to the patient and the family in rare disease is very, very, very high, and that is one of the reasons why I joined a company like Rocket to make a difference there.
And do you think it's easier to focus? You did mention that there's more focus at smaller biotechs. And do you think for rare diseases specifically that makes it more advantageous to work within a smaller biotech environment versus a big pharma?
Well, it is true. Although in Novartis we had a very successful rare disease franchise, and they still have it. And at the end of the day, what happens too is that in big pharma you have big big markets, right, and big assets to support. So at the end of the day, it's a resource allocation question when you're in big pharma and you need to assign resources based on a portfolio strategy. And it is true that rare diseases, unless you have a high profitability, high gross margin product, like it is the case with cell and gene therapies, like Zolgensma or Kymriah, if you don't have that business case that is very solid from a bottom line point of view, then they become more questioned and challenged, right? I was in a rare disease franchise that, it was in a product that it was okay, profitability was okay, but it was not double, triple digit. Um, and then it was questioned, right? When you're in a biotech, that doesn't happen because the focus is purely that asset, that program. Of course, the business case is important, but you gain much more focus and you don't have the distraction of other portfolio assets. You don't have the distraction of a bigger P&L that is pushing to have more resources. So you, in a way, protect and carve out enough resources to support that particular rare disease that in a big company will have a harder time, especially in the development phases of the asset, which is more risky. Then you will see big pharma still going into rare diseases once the assets are de-risked. But the whole de-risking process, it usually sits in a biotech.
Very, very important and interesting insights there. Thank you. And in terms of commercialization strategies for gene therapy, I'm so happy to be able to talk to someone like yourself, and with the expertise that you have in the area, because of course, gene therapies, the intention a lot of the times is to be curative, and so a one-time gene therapy that can potentially cure a disease, and the cost associated with that, as we've seen, are quite high. And so, what is the strategy currently and moving forward? What do you think we're going to be seeing? Are we going to be seeing any changes in terms of how these gene therapies are priced and the strategies behind commercialization?
Yeah, and that's an ongoing question, right? Like, I mean, frankly speaking, you don't see a lot of gene therapies being commercialized, right? So it's a challenge. It's still an unanswered question. How soon these gene therapies are going to be established, right? How soon is big pharma or bigger companies together with biotechs are going to partner to bring them to market? You see cases like sickle cell disease, without going into any company or asset name, or beta thalassemia, or hemophilia, or Duchenne, with the recent news, right? From a safety point of view, it's a challenge. It's an area that we have come a long way from an R&D and manufacturing perspective. Not easy, but we have come a long way. I think we are still in the way to crack the code to bring gene therapies at a great scale. Then you have really good success stories, right? So if you think about the success stories, you have cases like Kimbraya, Yescarta, which are not gene but cell therapies in oncology, hematology, and also Carvicti in hematology. And they have one thing in common, which is that they operate in large markets, and the scale helps. And you also have big companies with good financial backing behind. In the case of gene therapy, it has mostly been in vivo. The most successful case being either Luxturna with Spark Therapeutics or Zolgensma with Novartis, right? And they have a scale up nicely. They were acquired by bigger pharma, and they keep growing very, very successfully. Main reason is that they operate, although may not be very big markets. It depending on how you look at it, these are not super big markets, but they serve populations with a very high unmet need, a very high
Right.
severity. So if you don't have, or if you don't cover and address high unmet need and high severity, it's going to be a challenge for a gene therapy. That's my opinion. It's going to be very difficult to price it at the level that you need. And we can talk about price in a moment. And it's going to be very challenging to see quick adoption in the marketplace if you have competitors, if you have alternative that they are good at. They are good, and as good as the gene therapy, right? Like we've seen in hemophilia, factor VIII is still today is somehow working in a similar way than other gene therapies in hemophilia, right? And patients and doctors, they are deciding that, hey, let's stick to the therapy that we know, right? Because we don't see a much more additional benefit to this. So not everything is about the economics and the price, but also about the impact in the patient and what's going to be working for them. Then from a pricing point of view, that is always a hot topic because the price points in gene therapies, they keep going up. Um, and yes, I could have a bias, right, working in a gene therapy company, but I also can tell you, but based on the numbers and the data we have, the margins are not as high as you would see in other therapeutic areas and modalities in pharma, right? Because the operational cost and the cost of goods and manufacturing, they're also very high. So at the end of the day, the gross margins in gene therapy, they are below average most of the time. That's why scaling up and adding assets in a platform is so important.
Indeed. Thank you for those insights and comments on the commercialization strategy and the price points. It's definitely an ongoing topic of discussion for sure for gene therapies. And in terms of collaboration and partnerships, I know you did touch on this in terms of really having those collaborations between smaller biotechs and bigger pharma companies, for example. But we're also, continuing to see collaborations between academia, research centers, and industry as well. So how important are those kinds of partnerships and collaborations in driving forward really a field as niche and potentially game changing as gene therapy?
Yeah, no, in gene therapy or any advanced therapeutic, complex therapeutic, but in gene and cell therapy, they're vital. I mean, I don't think it would work without that, especially when you're in a field that you don't see a big presence of big company in pharma. So collaboration, it's a really, you need to be very open-minded when it comes to R&D. So it starts most of the time with an academic center. In the case of Rocket, it was a research center in Spain, in Madrid, called CIEMAT, and also universities in the US. In Novartis, Kim Raya came from Penn, right, where we acquired the IP from Dr. Kohn, Dr. John, sorry. And in many companies, it has been the case. It has been academic, the source, right, funded by NIH in the US, and other public institutions in different countries, different jurisdictions. Then collaborating with patient groups, especially in a rare disease space, is extremely important. And that's a big area of collaboration, not only to educate the community, but even talking about endpoints and clinical trial design. And then a third area of collaboration, of course, are the PIs or primary investigators and the key opinion leaders or medical experts. Because in a gene therapy, you need to combine not only the knowledge about the condition and the therapeutic area, but the knowledge about the modality and how the technology is going to work in a particular center. So working with these primary investigators is extremely important, where even commercial needs to be involved early on, because they will be instrumental in training additional experts and in training the community and even setting up these treatment sites that they require highly skilled personnel, right? And a fourth one, it would be collaborating with CDMOs and manufacturing, outsourced manufacturing companies, that they bring in the expertise in cell and gene, and they can help us manage not only the risk of running the clinical trials, but control the cash runway and the capital expenditure.
And in terms of the regulatory landscape, excuse me, for cell and gene therapies, what is that like now currently? I think we have come a long way. We've seen a lot of progress in the last couple of years, especially with accelerated pathways and different other different regulatory pathways with the FDA, for example, also the EMA in Europe as well. And so what is the landscape currently like on the regulatory end for cell and gene therapies?
Well, the agency, especially in the US, they've been very progressive. With Dr. Marks at the helm, he's been trying to provide solutions, especially in rare diseases, where he knows is expensive, is complicated, is very risky, and he's been trying to create these consortiums to support to support regulation that will go across therapeutic areas, as long as you are within the same modality. And he's been even trying to reach out to the EMEA in Europe and the UK to align on regulations across jurisdictions. It is still a complex pathway, right? Because the regulatory bar keeps going up. The requirements and the number of products that are applying, it keeps increasing. That means that the level of complexity that is being requested, it keeps going up.
And so we hear a lot about engaging with regulatory agencies early on. And so
Uh-huh.
I would imagine that that's important and also ties into everything from all through to commercialization as well. So how early are we talking about in terms of engaging with regulatory agencies, and also, as you mentioned, thinking about the commercialization strategy? I know there are two different aspects, but
No,
just
no,
that early
but
thinking. How early are we talking?
yeah. So there are two ways to look at it. One is you need to engage with regulators, especially in a gene therapy space or radiopharmaceuticals or any complex therapeutic, very early on. Like even in basic research, and when you design your phase one, you need to work with them all along. And this is something that Rocket has been doing this from the very early days, and I was impressed always the way we've done it. And also in big pharma, you work with the agency all along, about the endpoints, about the populations, about what type of endpoints are going to be used later on in clinical practice. Especially in the US, they're very sensitive to that. They want to see endpoints that would be adopted in clinical practice. So aligning with them from that point of view, it is extremely important, right? Then from a commercialization point of view, it's more of an indoor assessment that we do, but of course working with the agency, but also with payers. And the engagement with payers early on, I mean, it wouldn't happen at the same time that you speak with an agency from a regulatory point of view, but it has to happen when you're starting your registrational trial. to define not only what would be the right endpoints, like PROs are critical for payers, but also to understand the different indications and what is the sequencing of that indication. You normally start with with there is a highest unmet need, right? With patients that they need the therapy faster and the most, and then you go down from that level of unmet need and severity down the therapeutic window and the therapeutic scale for that particular disease area. So working with payers and regulators is important to define what's going to be the sequence if you have an asset with multiple indications.
Indeed. And in terms of, you also touched on this, the importance of patient advocacy groups and patients and caregivers, of course, as important stakeholders at the table for gene therapies, rare diseases. What are some effective strategies in really making sure that those voices are at the center and always at the table and informing things like early development through to clinical trials and commercialization strategies as well?
Well, you invite them in your, I mean, you do it formally and informally, right? Formally, you you can have them in your strategic alliances that you build with your primary investigators. They usually go hand in hand. When you have a primary investigator, they usually either bring you over to meet with the research foundations and the patient advocacy groups. Every disease area has different groups formed. Some of them are more organized than others. I remember when I was in Novartis with myelofibrosis, they were very well organized here in the US with Dr. Mesa and in the UK with Dr. Harrison. And then you have other conditions that you don't see that level of presence, no, or other countries where you don't see that presence. But if you have good investigators, they normally go hand in hand with good patient groups, at least in my experience. Then you bring them once you identify them, you create these formal forums. They participate with you in advisory boards, and you discuss clinical trial design, endpoints. You ask for advice, right? Most of the time. Um, and then when you are preparing the filing and discussions with the agency, they love to participate with you. To me, an example that was impressive. It was when Sarepta was presenting their filing for elevitis in Duchenne, and you would see the role of the patient advocacy groups played back then. It was amazing. I mean, the level of engagement they had, and that's how good looks like, right? You want to be in that situation the day you have an outcome with the FDA or the day you present your filing in Europe. You want to have them by your side, or you want to be by their side presenting the solution to their problem.
Absolutely. And in terms of the rare disease space, where do you see it heading in general in the next, couple of years? We've seen a lot of growth, indeed, in the past couple of years, in the past decade or so, I would say. And so, what are sort of the trends, innovations, like we talk about, that are driving the field? Of course, gene therapies at the forefront of many of these innovations and trends. So where do you see the rare disease space evolving, and how?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to say, I will not I will not sugarcoat it or say that we are in the rainbows and unicorn space in rare disease now. Maybe a few years ago it was, but it is true that the entrance of, for instance, GLP-1s, right? There are big revenue drivers, and with all the admiration for what they did because they're providing solutions to a lot of people. So that is always the debate, right? Do you go for very rare diseases that actually, when you have it in your family, is not that rare anymore, right? Or from an investment point of view, do you go to an area that is big market, mass market, big revenue? Um, I think rare disease is here to stay. Is more on us on the sponsor side and the investigator side to find solutions that really change practice. It's not about more Me Too therapies. and having an incremental improvement. I think we need to be ambitious. And if you're ambitious and you solve a problem like a gene therapy could do, or a radiopharmaceutical could do, or a cell therapy could do, then rare diseases will have a solution. I think they're going to have a harder time if you bring an incremental steps. No, an area that I think now is very interesting is T-cell engagers in autoimmune disorders, for instance, or new targets in oncology. So even if it is a rare tumor, if you have a solution that nobody has brought forward before, rare disease then will have a place, right? Even from an investment point of view. So that would be it's the way I see it. Then another area for rare disease is that you're gonna go only to one. You need to have a portfolio, right? Or you need to have a platform. And you need to add in assets into that platform, either by yourself or partnering with someone, in licensing or buying them. But the best that you could do, especially in a complex area like ex vivo gene therapies, autologous, you need to have a portfolio of assets, right, to make it sustainable. Then you can aggregate rare diseases.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those, again, wonderful, wonderful thoughts and important information, insights, industry perspectives, and patient advocacy. All of this ties in so deeply into the rare disease space. And any final thoughts or comments that you'd like to share before?
Well, what I would say is anybody who wants to join the quest to solve rare diseases, I really encourage you to do it. It is fascinating because you're so close to the patient community, and you feel that you are providing a solution to many families that they are in despair, that they know that their kids have this problem, or that they have this problem. So it's an area that is fascinating. I know that now there is a lot of attention for big therapeutic areas that we talked about and we covered. But I think gene therapy is very special. So I will really encourage you to think about it and consider it and bring value, because there is a need for high value and high talent in the space.
It's a wonderful, wonderful message. And I really liked what you said before, Carlos, that if it's in your family or within your circles, friends, it's not so rare anymore. So thank you so much once again for your time today, and had such a great time listening to all of the expertise that you bring to the table. And I want to thank you so much for all that you do in really leading in this space. And we look forward to all of the fantastic work from Rocket and just in the space moving forward. So thank you once again for your time.
Yeah. Likewise, Ayesha. Thanks a lot, Xtalk, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Absolutely. We're going to keep our eye out on the latest developments from Rocket Pharma and your work there as well, Carlos. So thank you so much for all that you do, and once again for your time. That's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.